So hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sports Philanthropy webinar series. My name is Roy Kessel. I'm the founder of the Sports Philanthropy Network. And on behalf of myself and Caleb Bradham, our VP of Community Development, and our whole Sports Philanthropy Network team, would like to welcome you here. We've got an amazing group of people on our team that help put these events together and do all the work on our social media accounts and a lot of the other programming that you'll see. Today, we're very fortunate to have David with us, and David's going to talk about creating win-win partnerships. David's got a long experience working with sports and sports organizations. I encourage everybody to share your video, let us see your faces, interact and ask questions. You can drop them in the chat and I can interject, or if you want to be called on, I can call on you and bring you in for the questioning. After the webinar, you will get a evaluation from Abby. It would help us if you could fill that in and let us know what other types of topics and content you would like to see. There's a lot of new ways that you can engage with Sports Philanthropy Network in 2021. So I encourage you to take a look at our task forces, at our message boards, and then our Sports Philanthropy World Conference is coming up June 28th and 29th. So you already know about these webinars. Our podcast, the Sports Philanthropy podcast I host, is every Tuesday and Thursday. Kayla hosts our Legacy After the Locker Room podcast every Saturday, where she interviews athletes about their impact in the community. And you can follow all of our social media accounts. We're pretty easy to find on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere like that. You know, Abby, Kelsey, Audra, the rest of our team do a great job helping us put together the weekly newsstand and monthly newsletter event calendar. And we can try and help you customize your interaction so we can deliver exactly what you want into your mailbox. So I don't want to take more time away from David because I know he's got an incredible presentation for us. And again, I encourage you to participate and drop questions in, and I'll interject and stop David so we can get those answered along the way. Don't hold them till the end because we want this to be interactive and we encourage you to participate. So David, thank you for being with us today.
Roy, it's my pleasure. Really looking forward to it. This is a topic and an area where I spent most of my time running a nonprofit organization for almost 15 years. We were in the sports-based youth development space. It was called Pitch In for Baseball and later became Pitch In for Baseball and Softball. And as a result, you know, figuring out how to live in the world of sports partnerships was a big area of focus. We didn't have a traditional, I mean, we did a lot of the traditional development things in terms of annual giving and major gifts and a little bit of work with foundations, but this was a bigger piece of the pie in our world than you would see traditionally. And for us, it was not just important in terms of revenue, but important in terms of awareness building and creating other relationships. So given the following that you have, being in the sports-based youth development space, some of it or just others in the sports philanthropy space more generally, I thought this would be helpful. And as you said, I'm really encouraging people to present and share their questions, no matter if you think it's a small question, quote, a dumb question or whatever, just throw it out there. Let's use that to take what I have and make it more personalized for you. So with that, is it okay? We're just going to launch in?
Yep, let's go ahead.
Let's do it. So over time, strategic partnerships became a big part of the success of our organization. And this shows at a snapshot in time who our partnership group looked like. I want to start with a story and focus on the upper left-hand corner with this is the Little League International logo. And talk a little bit about sometimes how timing can play a role in partnerships. And then I'll go into some of the more formal things, but I want to start with the story because our organization was formed in September of 2005. And let me take everybody back to a moment in time where you were. You'll remember where you were when I say the next few words. This happened, our first board meeting was about 3 weeks after Hurricane Katrina struck the Gulf Coast region. So no matter if you remember that was late August of 2005 or not, pretty much everybody has a sense for what was happening in the world at that time. And what was happening in the world at that time was everyone had this intense focus on what they could do to potentially provide assistance to people that were displaced, stranded, underwater, at risk, all of those things. And it happened at a moment's notice. There was, by the way, another major hurricane, Hurricane Rita, which came on the heels of that just a few weeks afterwards. So it was this really crazy sequence of events in the Gulf Coast region. And it was something that had the full attention of everybody. We had been an organization for literally 5 minutes, okay, when this had happened. And our organization's main focus, our main activity was to collect and redistribute baseball and softball equipment so that kids in under-resourced communities could play. And to put this in perspective, Little League International is the largest youth sports organization in the world. Over 2 million kids around the world play. And it'd be sort of like going up to the front door of Walmart and knocking on the door and telling them that you wanted to sell your product, right? So we were in business a minute, didn't literally have one piece of equipment yet, not one. But what I did have is a board member who had a relationship with Little League International and set up a lunch with their CEO, Steve Keener. And Steve took the meeting and we went to lunch at the famous, if you've ever been to Williamsport, the Bullfrog Tavern. If you ever go for the Little League World Series, suggest the Bullfrog. And we went there and we sat down to talk. And what this illustrates at the end of the day is one very simple fact. You don't sell your organization to somebody else. They buy your organization. They're purchasers. And so they had a problem that they needed to solve. And that problem was, how can we help groups in this particular region of the world? And as big as Little League was, and as the reach goes all over the globe, they didn't have the wherewithal, the infrastructure to provide assistance to these groups. All they could offer them was waiving their charter fees. So the matter, it would go something like this. You're on a sinking ship and somebody offers you some sunscreen. Now, it's not that sunscreen's not helpful, because you could really catch a terrible sunburn while you're out there on that sinking ship, but it's really not what you need. And they knew, they were self-aware, and they knew that they needed to do more for these communities. And so when I said, well, we have the ability to get equipment in the hands of the kids that need it in these areas, they said, let's work together. So again, the fundamental thing this scores right now is two things. One, we had a relationship through a board member that got us into the room with the right person. Without that relationship, my outreach to them would have likely never materialized into a meeting, and certainly not a meeting with the leader of the organization. I might have gotten a meeting with somebody several steps below. And the other thing it illustrates very clearly is you need to be able to solve a problem for your partner. You need to be able to do something of value for your partner in order for them to want to do business with you, because they have a lot of people knocking on their door. And we'll touch on a lot of different examples. And certainly if anybody has questions about any one of these individual organizations, I'm happy to go talk about those individual dynamics. But before I got into the rest of the presentation, I want to just highlight that story. We had been in business a minute, didn't know anything about anything, didn't have a piece of equipment to share, yet we're able to land a partnership with the largest person, the largest organization, stakeholder in our world, because we could solve a problem that they had at that moment in time. So those dynamics, that perfect storm, put me in a position where I thought, well, this partnership thing, this isn't that hard. We should be able to do this with anybody. And little did I know that it wasn't going to be quite that easy, and those dynamics didn't exist in all of the places that we wanted to do business. So I want to throw this out, and people can chat their response, but has a board member ever suggested that you, assuming you're an executive director of your organization or maybe another key staff person, contact a professional sports team, league, or major corporation for support? Has that ever happened? And you could type your answer into the chat and let us know what you're thinking. But my guess is there should be a lot of yeses in this world, a few head nods, and maybe it's a polite conversation that you have at that point. You maybe thank the board member for their brilliant new idea that's never occurred to anybody else. And then you have to figure out a way to let them know that it's just not that easy. You know, if you talk to any sports organization, you know, Roy, you're sitting in Chicago, imagine what happens on a daily basis for the community affairs people for the Cubs, right? They're getting inundated with requests 365 days a year from every organization that thinks, we'll call the Cubs. They're good guys. They make a lot of money. They'll help us. And whether they are good guys, women, an organization with a wonderful culture or not, there's so much going on there that the stuff that you need and your request or your voice is bound to get lost. So let's try to figure out how to make sure your voice doesn't get lost and you have a better chance of success. So I want to go back before we go forward and talk about your partnership mindset. I can tell you that this was my partnership mindset at the start of running my organization. I was the founder, and I had a bunch of thoughts in my head, and those thoughts are, well, what can the partner do for our organization? That was the main thing I was looking at. Like, what could all the things they could do for us? If they have players and they have money and they have exposure, they have all these things that we want, and let's go get them. And I would think a lot about, well, we're a baseball organization, and maybe they're in the baseball industry, and they'll definitely want to support us because of the wonderful mission that we have. And I'm sure that given the background of this individual player, that player will want to give their time, their money, get involved with us in some way, shape, or form. And we should just pick up the phone and call them because they will help us. Now, this sounds, even as I created a slide, like so naive that it's somewhat laughable. But at the same time, it's not uncommon to have elements of this in our mindset. And so I'll call this the entitlement mindset. We're entitled to help because fill in the blank. And I'm going to make a healthy little argument over the next few minutes that may not be the most productive mindset to have, and that we should maybe come up with a better or different approach. And by the way, Roy, I'm more than happy to make sure you have a copy of this presentation so you can share it with folks that are on. And if it's of value to them, I'm more than happy for them to have it.
Yeah, we'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of this so you can follow up on these ideas and follow up with David.
Great. So when we move from potentially an entitlement mindset to what I'll call a value added mindset, a win-win mindset, or just in simplest terms, a good mindset, what does that consist of? And it consists of a few things. It forces you to look at this relationship in a different way. Not what can they do for you, but what can you do for this partnership? What value can you bring to this partnership? Put the light on yourself and think about that. And that's really sometimes not an easy thing to answer. But if you can't answer that question, it's sort of like, then why would you bother going to the next step? If you can't bring something of value to the partnership, then don't start doing the outreach. Newsflash, the New York Yankees are not waking up in the morning waiting for your phone call, or fill in the blank major sports franchise or major corporation. They've got plenty of things to do without you. And unless you can bring something of value to them, it's a non-starter. The next question is really one of, why us over a similar organization? Now, we were in the baseball space and we were collecting and distributing equipment. And frankly, not that many people were doing that. But it won't matter from that perspective. Let's take it slightly differently. Let's say you are involved with any sport and you're helping underserved youth. And you're going to either a major corporation or major sports team or sports league. They now are faced with not just deciding that they want to support this type of work, helping underserved youth play sports, but now they're faced with a different decision. Why should I choose your organization over another organization that does similar work? And so you are in a competitive environment that forces you to really sharpen your message, sharpen your value equation, and sharpen other elements of your pitch to them, so that not only can you get the meeting, but then when they decide that you're worthy, then they make the next decision of, you're so worthy that I'm going to choose you over these other organizations. So no one really wants to be you don't want to be on the medal stand. You want to be on the top step of the medal stand, getting the gold. The next element, and this is a little bit of what value can you bring to this partnership, is what opportunities or content or audience can we provide? And I'll go into some of this in a little bit more depth later. But again, you're looking at your assets as an organization. What do you have that you can give specifically to them that will be of value to them, that will be kind of plug and play helpful to them? And then how can we make this relationship transformational? And the alternative is having a relationship be transactional. So transactional is, we have a gala coming up and we would like something for our silent or live auction, and you fill out some form, they send you some piece of signed memorabilia, you auction it off for between $25 and $2 million, closer to 25, and then that's fine. That's a transactional relationship. There's value in that, but it's not the kind of relationship that we were looking for. And it's not the kind of relationship that many of you are looking for. What we were looking for was financial support, support building awareness, introductions potentially to other organizations, testimonials, potentially participation on our board of directors, things of that nature. So those are transformational relationships and not transactional. So before you pick up the phone and start trying to find your way in the front door or side door, you need to start doing a few things. And I want to focus on this because, again, these things are going to really determine your ability to be successful or not. So let's start on the first area, which is finding alignment between your impact and the giving focus of the partner. If you are on the website of a target partner and you see that they are all about education, everything they do and speak about talks about increasing kids' opportunities in their future through successful, access to and participation in our educational system. Okay. So if that's the case, if they're talking about education and there is nothing in your impact that really speaks to education because you're doing something else that really doesn't touch on that, then you're going to have trouble, because that is going to be the first filter that they apply when they're going to think about doing any work with you. Now, that's good to know, and you don't want to twist yourself into a pretzel, into a knot, to try to find a way to tell that story, but you need to look for patterns about what you are able to deliver, and then find partners who have a cultural match, a mindset match about what kind of impact they're looking for. So if they're talking about, and again, this is 2021, if they're talking about inclusion as an important corporate social responsibility goal, then you have to be able to deliver inclusion to the partner in a way that's meaningful to them, that they would then want to talk about on their platforms. Because if you don't, they're really not going to engage, because there's so many organizations that are going to talk about that. And I know it sounds simplistic to start there, but you have to be able to satisfy this before you can move to the next step. All right. So what is the next step? We talked a little bit earlier about what can you bring to them. And this is where, again, this is before you've made one phone call. You're just doing your done some research on the first step. And now you come to the second step, which is you're going to curate your data. You're going to know how many kids you're impacting. You're going to have photos, video, whatever. You're going to have specific stories of how you've transformed the lives of either kids or a league or a community or whatever your particular impact is all about. You're going to have this curated, and you're going to have at your disposal the very best of those. Now, again, let's try to think it through. Let's say we're going we're going to pick up the phone and we're going to call the New York Yankees, and that's great. So what does that mean? I might want to know how many kids I'm helping in the Bronx. I might want to know if I have any pictures of kids that I've helped in the Bronx and impact stories of kids that I've helped in the Bronx, as an example. So those would be, that's my first best option. Maybe I don't have that. So what can I then do? And then what can I then do? But you really want to try to make sure you don't just try to take your stuff and take that square peg and jam it into a round hole. You want to think about what's going to have the most meaning to a partner. And I've been in meetings where you're sitting with the Minnesota Twins, and just somehow, miraculously, the kid that comes up on the image of in your presentation is wearing a Twins jersey, because we not only gave away equipment, but we donated uniforms as well. And sometimes those uniforms included the names of major league teams. Now, imagine if you're sitting across the desk from somebody in the Twins and they see their logo appear. That's just going to put a smile on their face, and that's going to make things easier, and that's going to make the conversation more likely to get below the surface. And then the last thing you have to do is you have to identify relationships or influencers to foster a warm introduction. Most of us can find a way through the internet to find somebody and email somebody and cold call them in some way, shape, or form. And that's fine. I mean, this somebody with a couple of clicks can do that stuff. Now, I don't know what the data actually shows in terms of your ability to take a cold call and translate it all the way to a successful partnership with a major corporation or sports team or league, but I'm guessing it's super low. Okay. Now, so what I would do, and what I would suggest you all do, and if you think back to my Little League story at the outset of this conversation, I had a board member whose father was previously, he had passed, but earlier in his life had been on their board of directors for Little League International. They were going to take the call from my board member because of the relationship that he had with Little League and the relationship that his father had. And so investing time to find any kind of a warm introduction or better way of getting in front of that person is critical, because you may only have one chance to get in front of them, and you want to shoot your best shot. And that really involves, working networks. And now with LinkedIn, it's easier to find, first and second level connections that may be able to do that with and for you. So again, before we've done anything in terms of reaching out to a partner, we're going to find out if they give in an area that's in line with the impact we're making. We're going to curate all the stuff we have internally and have it ready to go to make the smartest presentation that's going to mean the most to them. And then we're going to identify a way to knock on the door with the greatest chance of somebody answering that knock. Okay. So who should you contact at a potential partner? And the answer to this is whoever you know best and anyone you can. And what I mean by that is I had situations where you're checking into a hotel at a conference and the person in front of you is such and such, and you start talking and they become your contact with that team. I've taken the airport shuttle with the head of human relations at the New York Mets. And this woman had nothing to do with the charitable giving and all the other stuff, but we talked for 15 or 20 minutes. It was the two of us on the van. We've all been on those vans. There's nothing to do. You go from the airport to the hotel. It was, I think it was for the winter meetings for Major League Baseball. And by the time we finished, she had promised that she was going to introduce me to some people within the foundation of the New York Mets. And it still took me almost 2.5 years to land the New York Mets. I would not have had that clock start had I not had that van ride and that conversation. So the point is, you're looking for any way to get to the door so that somebody can say, I think it might be a good idea for you to talk to David about the work that his organization is doing, and then replace the words David with your name and put your organization in there. But this is where you really have to just think about getting somebody who is going to vouch for you in some way, shape, or form so that they will take the meeting. And again, I know that at some level, this sounds really basic and fundamental. All I can tell you is if you're not doing this, your likelihood of getting the meeting that you so much want is almost zero. So you really have to invest the time and find a way in through somebody that can get you in front of. Maybe it's not the right person at first. Maybe it's 1 degree of separation, but at least that person's now going to be committed to helping you get in front of that right person.
I want to jump in for a minute because I think
Please.
that's a really important point that David just touched on, which is the people that can help you at an organization are not always reflected by the title that they have either. There's people who have a lot of influence internally that may not have a title that you would recognize as having that much influence from the outside. And there's people who have fantastic titles that externally look like they should be a decision maker, and they really aren't. The other thing in the sports business world is people move a lot. And so making friends and making contacts and building relationships over the course of the time and in your career will pay dividends down the road. And as David said, he talked about 2.5 years. If you think about it, most people in today's world can't wait 2.5 minutes. You text them and they somebody hasn't heard back in 2.5 minutes from a text, and then they're all agitated like you're ignoring them. And so having the patience to do that, it's a long play. You're not going to be able to just dial somebody up and have them go, "Hey, David, that's the greatest thing I've ever heard of. Let me write you a check. Let me bring you in on a partnership."
Everything you said is 100% true. And I will just, echo a couple of things. One is people do move, and that's why it's important for 2 things. One is to have a relationship with them so that when they move, you can bring already that warm introduction through them to wherever they land. But more importantly, you need to make sure that your relationship with the current organization doesn't rest solely with one individual. Because if it does rest solely with one individual and that individual moves, you are back to square zero. And that's not a great place to be. So I will also say, and this is, Roy, I'm sure you've had this experience, but it is not identical. Like, you can have a relationship with team A that could be through community, with team B that can be through their foundation. You could have a relationship with team C that could be through marketing. And each of them could have value, but they may start in a different place, or they may all start in the same place and end up in different places. So there really is a need for you to think and be agile when you're approaching these folks, because it's a lot of things that can end up in different areas. And we'll talk about that in just a minute as relates to one specific element. So I threw this up here, and I'm not trying to be silly about it, but when you get in front of a partner or potential partner, and I'm thinking about this being the first meeting, okay, this is where you don't have a relationship yet. Maybe there's a point in time where you have a relationship where you can put certain topics on the table. And I say what not to ask for. You don't ask for money. You don't ask for a player. You don't ask for things to happen in 5 minutes, and you don't ask to be included in their big stuff. Now, you want those things, and they know you want those things. So they're expecting you to talk about those things at some level. And what you're going to show them with your planning and your maturity and your long-term view is that you're not going to start the conversation in these places. These things will come. These things are critical at some level, and maybe not all of them, but maybe a couple of them have to happen. But if you start the conversation there, you'll find the partner kind of sticking their hands in their pocket when the check hits the middle of the table. Like, they know you want cash, okay? They know you want visibility. They know you want to make things happen now. But they control their purse. They may have a budget of X, and they may have requests for 50 or 100X. So they know that they're going to give money to some people. They just don't know how much and to how many organizations. They know that people want access to their players, and that's just a very, very difficult thing. And if there's time at the end, we can talk about why that's so hard, Roy. We all want to go quickly, but here's the thing. They are in control of this relationship. You don't set any of the terms. in the initial partnership. So if you say we want to do something in April, or we want to do something whatever the time frame is, their answer is pump the brakes. We'll let you know, whatever. So by bringing these things up, you're forcing them into a reaction to kind of put distance between you and them before you even build a relationship. So what I'm hoping for by just putting this slide up is not to diminish your enthusiasm or to take away, some of your hopes for what a partnership can involve. What I'm hoping I could do by putting this slide up here is keep the conversation open and engaging up front. So how do you do that? I'm going to give you 6 questions, things you could ask that could get them talking. So in any sales scenario, unlike this one where I'm talking all the time and nobody else, with the exception of Roy right now, is talking, the best kind of sales environment is where the potential prospect is doing the talking and you're doing the listening. And the best way for that to happen is for you to begin to ask them questions. And so here's some of the questions that I would think you might want to incorporate if you're going to get them talking in a non-threatening way, which is, are you looking to engage your employees? This is very non-threatening. This doesn't cost them anything because they're already paying their employees. Their employees have to do a certain amount of community service or whatever. And so get them to talk about something that's easy. Okay, get them to talk about something that's not going to put any danger in. And what would that look like? And you could ask them, give me an example, and all those things. Are you open to talking about this partnership on social media? Now, again, how much does social media cost them? 0. Are they able to do it easily? Yes. They have teams of people. They have staff. They have interns. They have people that are doing social media and in-house video. That's their job. So all you have to do now is park yourself on their to-do list, and now you can have real content that's ready to go. So by broaching the subject about social media, it allows you to come back to it at a later point in time, because that's going to be one of the things that you're going to want. And that's going to be one of the things that's probably easy for them to overlook or not pay attention to as it gets to the possibilities of the relationship coming together. I asked them to describe some of their most successful partnerships. Maybe by doing so, you'll get to understand what motivates them. So they might say, we love this partnership because it's completely turnkey. When we work with them, they do everything. And you can get a sense for the theme that, when I come back to talk to this partner about an idea, I'm going to underscore that our relationship is turnkey and we can do things in a certain way. And again, you're playing to your knowledge base that you've acquired, and you're using that to make the acceptance with the potential partner that much easier. So get them to talk about some of the things, some of the relationships and some of the partnerships that they really like. And in doing so, you should be able to pull from that things that you're going to want to highlight when you talk to them in the future. And then maybe you can shift it to, what is it about our organization that most interests you? There might be some element of the work you're doing that they're going to highlight. So instead of you talking about X that you do, you're going to talk about Y, because they're going to tell you the thing that they want to learn more about, or the thing that excited them the most. Maybe they heard about you on the news or saw some of your social media, or when you sent them an email, they went on your website and they learned about this project you did or whatever. Well, ask them what it is that interests them. And once they talk about it, you'll know, again, you'll get a little bit more visibility into what motivates them and why you're there that day. And then we can talk about money in this way. Maybe for organizations that you support financially, what range does that fall in? Well, then they can say things, they can hem and haw, and they could do this and that. Well, when we support organizations at first, that's normally around $2,500 to $5,000. But we have some partners, once they've been with us, we can potentially increase that to X or Y. But at least you'll know what ballpark you're playing in. If you're going to write them a proposal for $100,000 and their typical gift is $10,000, they're not going to give you $10,000 because you're asking for $100. They're going to give you $0 because you've said you need $100 and they can't do $100, and they don't want to do something part way. So it's really important that you understand, and we know this from, foundation research and other stuff, like what's the typical grant look like and all those other things. But don't forget about this. Get them to talk about it in a way that makes it comfortable, so that if they said 10,000, and you can come back and, son of a gun, your proposal is going to be for $10,000. Okay. Because you want to give them an easy way to say yes. And then what I say, and what I learned over time, is, would it be okay if I followed up with you in terms of how we might work together? I don't feel, and I didn't feel the pressure over time of having to come in with the idea that I was necessarily pitching them. I had it in my mind and I was willing to talk about it. But what I really wanted to do was show them that I was listening, and then I gathered all this information, and then I put together a more thoughtful package of ideas that would be a coherent way of playing back the themes that they told me when I came back to them. And also, this guarantees me a second bite at the apple, because now I'm in front of them a second time. The first time, there's all this anxiety. They don't know me. I don't know them. The second time, it's like a little bit of the we're old friends, not to overplay something, but there's a totally different environment when you're in front of somebody the second time than when you're in front of them the first time. And by granting you a second meeting, they're really showing you that they're serious about you. So I would tend to look for this as an opportunity of trying to strengthen and almost pre-sell us as an organization, showing our maturity, that I would like to come back to them with something that's specific based on the information they provided me, that's really going to fit their eye, that meets the needs and the things that they just told me today, and thank them and get out of there before they throw me out. Okay. So like, I want to end on a high note. I don't want to put any pressure on them. I just want to try to figure out a way to get back to them. And they should probably say yes, hopefully. So Roy, I want to just kind of summarize and wrap up these formal pieces a little bit, and then we can go into some of the questions that either you have or some of your guests have. But I really want people to focus on that you need to develop a mindset for how you can help the partner. You need to do your research on aligning your impact and finding a warm introduction. And then you need to bring questions and not a sense of entitlement to any conversation you have with a prospective partner. So, I mean, those are some of the key things I would want people to take away. But as I said before, when you and I were talking about this presentation, I really want to make it about your guests and trying to be helpful to them, and answer any questions that they may have.
Thanks, David. I think you covered a lot of great information, and I really like the way you laid it out, because one of the criticisms that we hear frequently from teams is, exactly, if you go back, I'm just trying to pull up the other slides that you had. It was the one about, what not to ask for. And one of the things that we hear often is that people will contact uh, any major league franchise, right? It doesn't matter what sport. And they want the star player, and they contact the community relations or the foundation at that team and say, we want star player to come and be at XYZ. But they haven't done, as you laid out here, the background work that is really necessary to establish the relationship of what the connection is between that player and the cause. Because it's not just about being a celebrity. The teams really want to connect the players to a cause that has meaning, something that they're passionate about. And so, I think one of the questions earlier from Brandon was, how do you connect to the teams? And, I think you can talk to that issue about how a small nonprofit can contact teams. But a lot of it, as you laid out in the presentation, is doing the research and finding an issue that relates to your organization that has some commonality with initiatives that the team is already undertaking, which are usually pretty easy to find on their website or on their social media.
That's right. That's right. They're going to be pretty transparent about that. Most of these are major corporations. They have annual reports. They have corporate social responsibility stuff that they post on their website. You got to just dig. You don't have to be exactly Sherlock Holmes to find this stuff. And speaking specifically about players and engaging players, I want to just make sure people understand that The teams don't want to bother their players, first of all. The teams don't own the players. The players are their own brands. They are employees of the company, but they are very hands-off with them when it comes to this kind of stuff. And in baseball, let me paint a very clear picture of what that looks and feels like. Teams are in spring training now. I guess the season's starting in a minute, so maybe they're not still in spring training. But when teams are in spring training, there's one day where somebody from community affairs gets there with a stack of pictures, jerseys, bats, whatever, and player X will go sign for an hour, and every player does that. Maybe the bigger players sign more and some of the fringe players sign less, but they sign stuff, they stick it in a closet, and they don't go back to those players and ask them for any of that stuff unless it's a really extenuating circumstance. They have it, that's it. They bother them no more. During the season, players have painfully few days off in most professional sports. And when they do, and if they're going to do something charitable, the player, David Wright, was going to go support Johan Santana's event. Johan Santana was going to support David Wright's event. They're going to do things that are in their wheelhouse. They're going to do something that's involved with their charitable foundation or whatever. They have very little time, and they're certainly not going to do things like that during the season. So again, when you're thinking about bothering the player, understand that. Think about the team that you follow most closely in professional sports. And then from their advertising, you can probably see that they have certain major sponsors. Maybe it's a car dealership or something else. That sponsor that's giving them hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, might get access to one player for part of one day a year to go to one golf outing or make one commercial or do one thing. The sponsor giving the company millions of dollars gets the player for a little bit of time. So the idea that you coming off the street are going to get that player puts it into some perspective. I've always told people that if you want a player, don't go through the team. If you want a player, go directly to the player, go through their agent, go through their wife or friend or neighbor or something. The team has got all these firewalls between themselves and the players, and they just don't want to get involved in that. That just changes the dynamics. If you want to get a player and you've got your heart set on that, or you have a special way of getting them, go directly to them. That would be my advice on that particular subject. Anyway, other questions?
And I'm going to take that even one step further, having been on the agent side. I know that frequently the agents end up being gatekeepers for the players. And in my opinion, do a disservice often to the player because they don't get them involved based on what the cause is or what the real connection to the player is. They get them, it's based on just dollars, right? How many dollars are you going to give my guy to come to your golf outing or your dinner? And I tell most organizations that the players want money if they're making an appearance, if their role is as a celebrity. The way to get them to support your organization is to find a way to connect them to the cause. And that takes more work and more research because everything in the player's background is not as easy to find as the current initiatives of a pro sports team. So you may not know what cancer or other diseases have been in the family. You may not know if somebody has been wrongly incarcerated or killed or a victim of a drunk driving accident or any other type of area. So doing your due diligence on the player will allow you to find that connection that may allow you to get to the player directly or may have an agent sort of open their eyes a little bit differently because now you're not just an appearance, you're really a true connection that will be meaningful to the player.
That's right. And in our situation, Roy, just building on your thought is, we looked at where the player came from, what was their hometown. And so if we could provide equipment to kids in the community of where this player was from, then that's personal. And many of them came from foreign countries or came from really hard circumstances. And they know how difficult it is for those kids back in their community. They escaped. They made it big, but very few people do. So giving them a chance, to your point, to be involved and to make it personal. So we have done equipment donations in the off season with players back in Puerto Rico, in the Dominican Republic, in other places. But again, you have to know where they're from, and you have to bring that level of understanding to that conversation so that you can, the player will know that you're serious and about making it about the kids and not necessarily about just stealing all the excitement. You want to make them the hero and not your organization the hero.
So David, I think one of the other challenges, if you go back to the slide, two slides before that, was you talked about cultivating new partners, and as you're doing the alignment, um, focusing with the partner and looking at how you can curate the data and assets and impact stories. And I think that's a big challenge, especially for younger organizations that don't have as much bandwidth and as many resources to track and aggregate and curate all of that information. So what do you suggest? You know, as you said, you got a fortunate break and got a lunch with Little League before you would have had anything on that line. You had nothing there. What do you suggest for new organizations?
Right. So I, there's a little cliche that I like to throw out about this time, which is lack of resources is not an excuse for lack of rigor. So you have to be committed to gathering impact data and impact stories from day one with your organization. Now, that may not be sophisticated, scientific, or whatever, but from day one, your organization has to be measuring its impact. Now, it can be informed, it doesn't have to be objective, it could be anecdotal, it could be this, it could be that, but you have to be doing this. If you can't tell people the difference your organization is making, you cannot survive. So I don't use the excuse of how long you've been doing it as a reason for you to not be able to share this impact. You have to have this mindset, unless you get dumb lucky like we did with the Little League meeting. And lucky's great, but I mean, we hadn't done anything yet, and yet we were still able to build some partnerships. And they had a list of partners, and then after we did things with Little League, their partners wanted to help us, and that was a great dynamic. That's not going to happen for everybody. So you have to have a process in place to gather this information. And if you don't, you have to make that investment to figure it out, whether it's paid staff or interns or volunteers, whatever. You have to be able to gather this. You have to figure out a way to gather images, whether it's video or photos. You have to figure out ways to do that. Now, in most of the programs, these are a lot of direct service providers. They have kids playing sports, or they have other people that they're helping. They're right in front of them. And everybody has a cell phone these days. So you don't need to hire a professional photographer. Kids are making TikTok videos every 5 seconds when they're home, right? They know how to make a video and talk about the work that your organization's doing. You just need to figure out a way to get them excited. So maybe it is, why don't you make a TikTok video talking about the work we're doing and whatever? And the kids are going to do that, and they're going to do some fun dance or gesture or whatever, and they're going to find a way to do it. So every organization can do this stuff. The level of sophistication, Roy, I think is going to differ based on how long you're around. But no matter how long you're around, you have to be able to do this.
And I want you to go back to the slide before that, because I think this is really a great spot to kind of wrap up the conversation. Um, you talked about what you did with Little League and getting that lucky break, but the reality is you get that break one time. And if you don't perform afterwards and you don't show them that you have the ability to execute and deliver what you pitched them on, right? However you got in the door, they're not going to come back again. And so they made those introductions. If you started uh, killing off relationships, for lack of a better term, because you weren't fulfilling your commitment to those organizations in terms of delivering the equipment and the things that you were gathering, that partnership wouldn't have lasted very long. And I think that goes back to this slide, and that's why I kind of thought this was a great place to end, because when you look at the value that you can bring to the partnership, I encourage you to think creatively about what you have within your organization. And that's a combination of you individually, who's leading the organization, your whole staff, your board members, your donors. There's a lot of people you interact with. And I think that this is something that's really critical that often gets glossed over in terms of what can you bring to benefit the organization. As you said, the Yankees aren't sitting there waiting for a small organization to pitch them because they've got 1,000 of them that walk right in the door. So if you don't walk in the door, they don't care.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I just had a very simple mindset. It was called execute with excellence. You have to you have to know what you're good at. You have to stay in your lane. And if they want you to do something that's over here and you can't really do the thing that's over there because it's just not your thing, then you're going to fail. To your point, Roy, you might do it one time, but it's not going to go the way you want. It's not going to go the way they want. And you're not going to be able to deliver the kind of program and the kind of value you're hoping for. So I think it's really important to know who you are, and to have this. I mean, the details really matter, and execution, on because you do. If you're not successful leading up to the first year's partnership, forgetting the day of the partnership, all the things that lead up to that, because they'll cancel it before it even happens if they're getting a bad vibe. These organizations are very risk averse. They're very conservative. They want things to go well. They don't want to disappoint anybody. They're the fill in the blank, Dodgers, Yankees, whatever. So they can't look bad. They have a lot at stake, and they can't look bad. So it is critical that you don't bite off more than you can chew in the first year. And within that, and underlining this one piece, Roy, whatever you can do with a partner in the first year is good enough. Meaning you want money and this and that and whatever. Maybe all of those things aren't going to happen in the first year. Maybe you're only going to get 2,500, not the 25,000, or maybe you're not going to get any money at all. You're simply just going to get a social media mention and whatever. But getting to year one of a partnership is in and of itself an accomplishment. And you can build from there by doing a great job in that first year. And then another set of possibilities become available to you because you've proven yourself. And it's a million cliches here, but they're kicking the tires, right? They want to make sure that you guys can do what you can do before they kind of, okay, well, now that we've seen you guys are really good at this, wow, let's do that again and let's make it bigger and all these other things. And you're like, of course, that's what we wanted to do in the beginning, but you wouldn't let us. So you take what you can get up front, and then you do everything you can to make it go like crazy so that you can have them want to come back for more and expand the relationship. So, to me, that's everything is how you execute and can you deliver on your promises.
And I think you touched on key points there, which is that delivery. When you look at the third section of this slide, what opportunity, content, and audience can we provide? You, as an organization, anybody's organization has a certain amount of reach, and you're not going to have the reach of a major league sports franchise. You're not going to get the attention that they have, but maybe there's other groups within your donor base, within your community, within your board that are attractive demographics for them. And I think that you get further with these organizations putting something on the table that can benefit the organization first before you're asking them for something. And to the extent that you've got a way to highlight work that they're doing or publicize it, you're going to get a better response from them than, as David said on that other slide with all the crying faces. If you walk in there and the first thing you're asking for is $5,000 or $10,000, I get every group being based here in Chicago that we used to talk to would say, well, McDonald's is based in Chicago, Wilson Sporting Goods is based in Chicago, Walgreens. These are companies that are here. They should care about the fact that we work in this community and they should want to support us. But they never put in the effort to develop the case that you laid out here with this methodology and be able to articulate, like, why is that a connection to McDonald's? Why is it a connection to Walgreens? You have to show them something where there's a tangible connection because they're getting requests from thousands and thousands of organizations, and your one day golf outing with lower level celebrities and no real media coverage, it's not a media buy. They can't justify it as a media buy. It's a donation.
Right. Right. I mean, there's so many things that go into all of this stuff. One of the things I learned early was ask for things that were easy for somebody to give you. So if I was going to, again, we donated equipment and uniforms. If I was going to a Dick's Sporting Goods or an Under Armour or somebody else, I know I want money. But what I think might be easier for them to give me is equipment because they've already got it. Maybe they've got stuff that was manufactured and it's got returned, or there's some element to it that they can't sell, or they've moved on to the 2022 line, and so they got to get rid of the 2021 line. Whatever the problem is, I don't care. But if you're asking for them to give you money, that's harder and has to maybe have a different level of sign off and approval and all the other stuff. If you're asking for something, which could be social media or a gift in kind of something, then that may have a much easier path forward. And again, it's not that that's all you want, but if you were able to get equipment from a major manufacturer, and equipment was one of your major cost centers for your organization, that's a win, because you would have had to buy that equipment otherwise, and now it's being donated to you. So it is money, it is cash or a cash equivalent. So for us was never, about one thing. You really wanted to understand what was possible. We needed warehouse space from time to time. And if we were dealing with somebody that had warehouse space, then if they were willing to give us some of their warehouse space, then that was valuable to us. So each of the organizations that follow you has their own version of those things. And I encourage people to think creatively about all of the things that could be of value to you, and not always center it around money, even though we all know that would be the big prize.
And I want to just end on this note, which is, as David said throughout, it's relationship driven. You may start with a small aspect of that relationship, and it may not be anywhere close what you would like it to rise to later over time. But get your foot in that door, because the other thing that will happen is when an organization sees you doing good work, they will come to you oftentimes and suggest other ways that they can help, or offer other ideas of things that they can do to be a support. And so if you build that relationship, that's going to serve you well in the long run. I want to thank everybody for being here today. David, I want to thank you for your time and generosity with sharing your insight with us. We'll have the recording posted and the slides as well, so you'll be able to access those. So on behalf of myself and our entire Sports Philanthropy Network team, we encourage you to continue to engage and interact with us, webinars, social media, our podcasts, and we hope to see you here next week. Thank you.